and welcome to another episode of Art Therapy. Today, we're joined by the great, exquisite, fantastic curator making waves in the Miami art scene, Z. Lopez Del Carmen.
Got every single name.
It's five names. I was trying to make sure I got it right.
It's that Caribbean heritage, man.
Yeah.
It's that Caribbean heritage. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, for sure. So, for those who don't know Z, I'm happy to make the pleasure of introducing you guys. She has been one of the purest souls I've met on this artistic journey. And as an emerging artist, it's really important to find people who are just down to support the cause and show love unconditionally, you know? And she's been really great in giving me some guidance as far as how to operate or like opportunities, just pointing out any ways that I can make some waves or like where to go or like any show that she's being a part of. So I really appreciate her a ton, and I know you guys are going to too. So, yeah, Z, tell us about yourself. Say what's up to the people.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I am so grateful to be here. I got respect for you, admiration for your work, and just what you stand for. So this for me is a privilege. For real.
Thank you.
So a little bit of my background. I tell everybody I am a guest in the art world. I don't come from an artist background. I mean, I did, community theater when I was younger.
Yeah.
That's as close as it got. Visual arts. If you gave me a ruler, I still can't make you a straight line. It is what it is. But I had the privilege and opportunity. My background, academically and professionally, was in nonprofit community organizing and policy advocacy. And I had the opportunity of being invited to be a part of a emerging gallery that wanted to focus on programming and connecting artists who had a message in their work
Okay.
with nonprofits in Miami that were already working on that topic.
Okay.
And so they brought me on as programming purely, and every artist that got involved challenged me. It was like, well, what would programming look like if you also curated from that perspective? And I have to say that every creative that invited me to be able to kind of take that chance to be really vulnerable publicly,
Yeah.
but they trusted me with their work to be my first time, they are the reason that I feel like there's a responsibility to show up as a curator.
Yeah.
And they're the reason. And if you see my IG handle and my bio, it says, artists I admire and respect, call me a curator. Because I feel like my job is to work towards always owning and earning that. Like, success is not owed to you.
Right.
You work towards it.
Right.
And so if somebody tells me, hey, you're getting here for me, then I'm going to keep working that way.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So tell me more about the nonprofit emerging art gallery that you were working with. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So they're called Green Space Miami. They still exist today.
Oh, I saw a flyer for them actually.
Yeah, they have an opening coming up, I think, not this Thursday, but the following Thursday.
Yeah.
Fact check me if I'm wrong. All right.
I will repost it, y'all.
Please. So I'm not working with them directly, but they are still aligning themselves with phenomenal artists. And really, I think that the biggest impact is the fact that there's a platform for the artists to lead the conversation.
Right.
And for me, that was, again, my introduction to curation, and I think what leads me to this day, where I don't think that my role is to come in and impose a narrative, but rather to listen and figure out, well, what is the conversation you're already having? What have you already been doing? And then how do we share that in a way that as many audiences as possible can access that and converse with it, whether they agree or not.
Right.
Like, that's what I want, is that I don't want for people to look at something that's being done in a way where I'm curating along with artists, where they're like, oh, I can hear your voice and your voice alone, and I see their art. I don't know that there's value in that for me. I want folks to be like, I can hear you conversing with the artist and inviting us to be part of that conversation.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's really important, the song and dance. Well, the dance that happens between the artist and the curator, because it's two sides of the same organism. You know what I mean? Like, it's an ecosystem, and curators have a very understated but very important role to play when it comes to how exhibitions are expressed. That's all it really is. It's like the artist is expressing to you and wants to express to the audience, and you are one of the vessels that helps make that happen. And I think that's really beautiful that you have such a intimate understanding of your role that you play, and also the fact that the first time you were even introduced to this role, it was already along the lines of, okay, This is the artist's message. Let's see how this aligns with what the public can do. You know what I mean? Like that's what green space sounds like. It sounds like the artist has a message. Who has been searching for this message this entire time? Right? And that's the type of art I like to try to make because I believe that art is all about connection. I believe that art is what connects each other. I believe that art imitates life, but it highlights specific aspects of life. You know what I mean? Like one thing that I had to realize is like being an artist is also like being a writer. You know, when it comes to like applying for exhibitions and shows and grants, and also just trying to find a way to articulate the abstract message that you're conveying through the art. You know what I mean? And curators are really great for that because like they're more logic based, where we are more like creative based. So you guys definitely help a lot out with that.
Yeah, I think that there's like this beautiful meeting place if a curator gets to really know the artist,
Mm-hmm.
because the work for the exhibition, whatever it is, whether it's a series, whether it's multiple pieces from different times in life,
Mm-hmm.
they encompass what you are creating in that moment from that frame of thought.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it's stuck there.
No.
Right? And it doesn't mean that that's where people interpret it from.
Mm-hmm.
They're interpreting it from where they are currently.
Exactly.
And even the artists, right? Like even you creatives would come back to the piece
Mm-hmm.
in a different environment, in a different exhibition, and there's like such a different contextualization that you're like, I know my history with this piece,
Yeah.
but now I have to contend with it in a different way.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, I find such a value in putting language that allows people to invites people to start the conversation with it, but doesn't exactly fill in all the blanks.
Right. Like I'm not spelling it out for you. I'm not telling you what to think. And that's what I did with my most recent piece. It's like usually I'm gonna like give you a whole like essay on where my mind was at and the conclusion I came to with the piece. But this time around I'm like, hey, like I wanna know what you guys think first, and I know art is first for the creator, but at the same time it's like my gift to you guys, and your perception of it helps me look at something from a different perspective. You know, like I always say, it's kind of hard to perceive yourself, and as an artist, like it's also hard for us to perceive our artwork because we have a completely different relationship with it. You know, like it's our baby. Like we saw it from its inception to the final product, and everyone else just sees that, and we all have like different relationships with our artwork. So for the conversation to be had and then like the viewer comes to a different conclusion than
Yeah.
the artists themselves, I feel like there's a beauty in that.
Hmm.
You know, like between the connection between like humans, between humans, you know.
Yeah. And you know what's the, at least for me, the best part is that I told an artist one time, and they knew this. We all know this, but sometimes you kind of have it, need it spelled out for you. And I was like, what does your art stand for when you're not present in the exhibition? Like you're there for opening night, right? We're there
Right.
for maybe there's a programming where you're speaking at. Maybe you are just, you have the time in your day because as we all know, artists are doing 10,000 things at once, right? Like your own PR person, the creative, making the work, finding your own supplies, like
Yeah.
making your own network,
Yeah.
a quintuple amount of things. You know, but I asked them, I'm like, what if you're not in the room? What is it that is the legacy of this piece if this was the one piece that talked for you when you were not there? And so sometimes when we interrogate that, I'm like, this is where I want to start the curatorial process from. Even if the series didn't come from that.
Yeah.
Because why is that the resounding message for you that you want to be the standing presence even if you're not there to explain it?
Wow. That's deep. So tell me more about the conversation you had, like the conclusion that was made with that specific artist.
Yeah, I've had that with multiple artists. I'm grateful and blessed to say that folks
Nice.
have, they've given me the space because there's been some people that I ask them that and they're like, that's not what I'm doing, and I have to respect it. I have to respect that.
Yeah.
It's not my place to impose my process.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can generalize a little bit, the multiple people that have answered that, it's been an array of things. I mean, we had an exhibition that started being really geographically important because it was held at an institution where all of these artists went through. That's where they got academic, processing of their artwork.
Okay.
Right. So it was a school, and all of them came back as adults. And there was an exhibition that we were having, and the conversation was initially, how do you engage with this institution of learning, and how does that meld with you being a creative? And then
Okay.
all of a sudden that question was asked, and it became the show was all black women. So Lonnie Johnson, Shire Vansa Black, and we have Friday. And so all black women, all speaking to this moment of what does our continued legacy look like for the black students plus students of color who come into these halls, into this gallery that is in an institution
Yeah.
that has a history that they have to contend with, positive or negative, but seeing it from the perspective of three black women collectively putting their work together with who they are now as adults and as established creatives.
Wow.
And so that was, we didn't start there. We started with, you're being brought back as alumni. What are alumni saying?
Right.
But rather it turned into, in that question, if you're not here, what do you want that student to see? And it was, how do we let them know that this is their space as much as ours, even though it's our work on the walls?
Wow.
And that has multiplied in every conversation I have, where people want to make space. They want to make mirrors where you see yourself, but they still don't muddle their image and their visage and their history.
Okay.
And that has been something that I've been trying to balance in everything. I don't want anybody to disappear in people's interpretations. I want there to be freedom for you to be able to interpret and to be present and to see yourself, but fully recognize who made that work and the history that made that work.
Right. Okay. That's beautifully said. Wow. So, yeah, between the viewer and the artist, the viewer wants to see a bit of themselves in the artwork. They want to feel represented. They want to feel seen, but also like understanding that is that artist's pure core identity. And from what I'm hearing, it's you really championing the idea that the art is so much bigger than the artist. It's so much bigger than the artist, and that's why like there's artists who have died like a millennia ago, and their artwork still stands and it still makes ripples, and people still look back on it and they think and they talk and they interpret it how they do it, and then you get more context on that artist. Like, okay, wow. And I think it's really beautiful that you are one of the people that can allow this platform to happen on multiple different situations, on multiple different levels, and those hard-hitting conversations. I feel like that's one of the most beautiful things there is about life, you know, like being able to have a conversation with someone, whether it be creative or just personal, that lets people come out with a new perspective, you know, and that's definitely what I aim to do with art therapy. And that's why I feel like you're one of the most perfect guests to have on the show, just because like you're embodying that philosophy, and art is all about your philosophy, and some people have none, and that's also part of their philosophy. Like they're just free to just express themselves however they see fit, and sometimes it's just not much deeper than that, and those artists also help me feel free, you know. So I really appreciate you sharing that perspective with us, seriously.
Yeah. There was something shared with me by Deja Carrington in the aspect of freedom and of art, not only bringing freedom but also bringing an archival aspect, right? And like this simultaneous history note taking, while also being not only being a witness but also being the griot who tells the story in the future. And when she shared that, it was a group of us. I wasn't alone. I kind of felt like that was the call to action for me, in the sense of like what defines a curator. Right. So if the artist is doing the work of making a snapshot of the moment, how do we assure that there is accompanying language that centers what that snapshot is, what that feeling is, what that personhood is, right? Because at least for me, I feel like I have gone to so many moments where art is centered and art becomes kind of a behind the glass wall moment, right? Like it is a snapshot, but it is devoid of the concept and the historical undertaking where it happened, right? Where I'm like, how do we make sure that that is still part of it? Where we honor that the fact that this art, even if it's contemporary, even if it's happening today, art that you are making right now of this moment, there is an archival aspect to that. There is a history note-taking that someone is going to access through that, where they're like, oh, I see the context of the time that they were operating within. And so how do we bring language to that, again, to invite people? whether it's to agree or disagree. And I love when people show up in the space and they're like, I don't see it, I don't get it, or I interpret it differently completely from the artist, from you. And I'm like, great.
That's fantastic.
Because you're operating from this context and this concept that you're within. How do we meet ourselves somewhere?
Right. So how do you associate language with abstract art? Because without the context of the artist literally explaining to you like where their head is at, all you have is just the feelings that the art piece gives, just from a completely unbiased perspective. So how do you tackle things like that?
Yeah. I don't make we statements.
Okay.
I make sure everybody knows it's an I statement.
Okay. Go on with that.
I think there's also responsibility as a curator to let people know what our biases are, right? All of us have them. All of us have biases. All of us have stereotypes that we need to work through, dismantle. All of us have operated from a place where what we know is almost sometimes a colonial perspective, right? And so when I see conceptual art, for me, it's almost this, it's this equal balance of freedom and constriction.
Okay.
Because I want to define it. I want to find the thing, the meaning. I want to tell people, like, this is what you should look for. This is concrete.
Okay.
Because that feels safe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's abstract, though. So then there's moments where I have to sit with it, and I'd be like, well, does that symbolism feel concrete for me because it's coming from my bias? Because it is what I know. It is where I feel comfort. It is what I feel like I can contend with. And so therefore I can dissect, right, and conceptualize.
Right.
Sometimes freedom comes from you not knowing. And that, for me, as a person who finds a lot of comfort in being able to control as much as possible, whether it's curating or not, I mean in my everyday life, right?
Right.
I would like to have as much order as possible.
Yeah.
I feel like, for me, that type of art really tells you, well, what does that look like to let go of control and to just have to be present with it? And to understand that someone might turn around and to you as a curator say, I don't think you hit the mark in any way. And it doesn't have to just be audiences. It could be an artist too.
Yeah.
What does it feel like to be a curator and have an artist tell you, I don't see what you're seeing right now?
How does it feel?
It's hard, man. It is hard because you have to come off of your pedestal. Not, and again, everything here is an I statement because I don't want to say that anybody else's concept is.
Yeah.
Because I learned so much from sitting with other curators who are telling me what their process looks like. But to have, and I've had those moments where an artist tells me, I see where you're coming from, but that's your perspective with my art. And to have someone be willing to accept your vulnerability and not reject it,
Right.
then becomes, for me, the impetus for how I want to curate the show. I want to tell people, come and kind of bear witness at the altar everything that you are.
Right.
Even if after you've read the didactic, right, the text of the artwork that comes from the artist's influence doesn't align with that.
Yeah.
Right? Artists, and correct me if I'm wrong from your perspective, gift their pieces when they put them out publicly. In my perspective, it's a gift. You put it out. You're sharing what you've done, what you see.
Yeah.
But you can't control how someone internalizes that.
No, not at all. And there's a part of me that has to accept that. And sometimes, like, whenever you accept something in life, sometimes you have to lean into it. Like, every single time I make an art piece, I end up doing something completely unintentional. And I'm like, oh my gosh, did I just ruin my piece? And that's the beauty of life. Like, sometimes things are going to happen completely out of your control, and that's going to either obstruct or enhance the final product, right? So I had to stop looking at a pessimistic mindset of letting it obstruct, and I'm like, okay, how am I gonna work around this thing? And I had to work around the fact that, like, people are gonna see my art completely different from what I do, right? People are always gonna, like, see a sunset, or they're gonna, like, see a face in my artwork that, like, I completely did subconsciously, and unless they pointed at it and I stared at it for 10 minutes, I wouldn't see it. But that's part of the beauty of it, at least for me as an artist, you know what I mean? Because all I'm doing is just laying myself completely bare on the canvas for everybody to see, and it's like, do with it what you will, right? But I hope that you come away with it with something positive. I hope you come away with it like with a smile on your face, even just like a small moment of joy, or just being taken away by it, getting lost in it. That's what I'm aiming for whenever I show off my artwork. You know, that's all. That's all. And that's enough for me to be satisfied.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, please.
Have you ever had someone in front of your work share with you what they've internalized from the work, and it has changed for you what that piece meant?
Oh, yeah. There was this one piece that I did. It was like 4 feet by 4 feet. It was this great man. His name is Chad. He's a fantastic crochet artist. We're going to work together soon. I hope you're watching, Chad. If not, it's
Yeah.
cool. It's totally
You're
cool.
being called to attention, Chad. It's happening, bro.
But yeah, like he looked at it for about like just a few seconds, and it's like he immediately like saw like me, but like from a perspective that I wasn't considering, and that's me as the very vulnerable, very kind of emotional, but also emotionally intelligent type of person, where like I really seek to understand everyone and everything, even though like not everything is to be understood. You know what I mean? Like I'm not always gonna get it, and the fact that I have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like some things you won't get like until like a year down the line when you look back at it. Sometimes you won't ever get it. But that's something that I have to accept. And like his conversation with me made me have to lean into the idea of acceptance of the unknown. Cause same thing as you, like I want control, I want order, as
Yeah.
disorderly as my minds can be. But sometimes like it's not for me to control. You know, the outcomes of these things are not for me to control. And that conversation helped me realize that I have to focus more on what I do control in my everyday life and developing strategies for maintaining that control or like maintaining order within the things that I already own, you know? Because it's hard, especially as like growing people. Like growth is so non-linear, which is one of the core aspects of my artwork. And I had to realize just how non-linear I feel on a daily basis and how non-linear my mind works. And for him to kind of open up to me like in the middle of this like group show gallery where it's just like full of people and we're just both just having a moment where we both feel understood by each other even though we didn't even exchange that many words. Like it was literally like a 5 to 7 minute exchange. I'm like, bro, this is my brother right here. Like this is my guy.
Yeah.
Shout out Chad, man. I hope you're watching. Yeah, but every single time I have a conversation with my art, it kind of opens my eyes to something that I've been internalizing. Like your subliminal comes out in your expression, even in a simple conversation. Like you might like speak something that's kind of like subtext as far as like your personality. Like when I walked in and then I saw that bag there, I'm like, Z, is that your bag? You're like, no. I'm like, is that my bag? Which exposed how like unorganized I can be. But I know you peeped that and you're like, that's just more context. And we're just all like constantly getting context on who we are and who others are. And all we can do is just progress from there.
I like that.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad that you've been introspective about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I really can do as a human being is to be introspective. I try to make sure that the line between being introspective and an overthinker is drawn because it can easily bleed into one another. But I constantly just seek to understand myself more and just be more present with myself and be more patient with myself and with like how my artwork is. Like there's a lot of detailed line work. Like I have no choice but to be patient, you know. I hate to reference cartoons or like animated media. I always do this, but like the fact that in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, bear with me, y'all.
Hello. Who's your favorite?
Who's my favorite? Man, that's a fantastic. It's got to be Michelangelo, man.
Get
He's
out
so
of here! It is Leo.
Leo?
Leonardo, come on, man. The double
Bruh.
katanas?
But that's such a straightforward answer, though. Like, I appreciate him for what he represents. But at the same time, I appreciate the childlike freeness that Michelangelo has. And I like how Master Splinter gave them all weapons that counter their personalities. Like Michelangelo is what? No. Yeah, Michelangelo. He has nunchucks, but nunchucks require like very precise movements. Like you can't be all wild and free.
Yeah.
Raphael is a very aggressive person, but the sides are completely defensive. So in a way, like my artwork is kind of me doing that to myself. Like, okay, this is how you are, but here's some tools that you're going to have to refine to be the higher version of yourself that you're seeking. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think everybody should kind of try to implement that within themselves in their daily life, because you can be your own best friend or your own worst enemy, and you
Yeah.
can be your own best strategist. And no one knows you like yourself, you know? So just try your best and like be present with yourself. Identify like, okay, here are some pitfalls and weaknesses that I tend to have. How do I trial by fire myself? Like, how do I
Yeah.
throw myself into the fray and like have no choice but to figure it out and sink or swim? You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
But that's like human existence,
Yeah.
right? And then we have this parachute that is art, where it might not be so linear, where you kind of have a swaying moment where you can reconsider what does it look like, whether I am showing up correct or showing up in liberty or showing up in action, in intentionality, in lack of direction,
Right.
right? Art is probably for me as someone that looks to what does a curation aspect of an artist's work. Like you invite me to your studio, you're just talking about what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm taking it all in. If you're inviting me into the aspect of like I would like there to be a curatorial directive to this, I'm looking for that. Like, are you challenging me to find freedom in the fact that there is no directive? Are you giving me a linear story to something? Are you aesthetically pointing me towards somewhere that is guiding my emotions?
Right.
Right. So there is just such a liberty and a fray in how you want to swing the pendulum, and the fact that you could change that at any point.
You really could.
Tomorrow you could do work that doesn't resemble what you're doing at all,
At
right?
all.
And there's some folks that are like, I want you to see my work and I want you to recognize that this is my piece, right? Like this is a series of my legacy.
Right.
And there is beauty in that.
Yeah.
But there's also this wonderful question that I've asked a lot of creatives that I've worked with when I'm like, what would it look like if you made a piece tomorrow without your name on it, without a label, where people would wonder, who made this? And what does this feel like without me comparing it to past work?
That's a great question. Like being an artist is kind of scary to just completely jump out of your style, right? But there's usually reward and risk, especially as a creative, because you gain nothing by just completely sitting in your comfort zone. And me doing this show is something that I wanted to do for a long time, but it's also very much out of my comfort zone, especially speaking to someone who is definitely established and articulating so well what she does and how she goes about it. And me myself, I'm trying to get to a point where I am also trying to establish myself and articulate myself well. But the only way to get better is to try, right? Like, you're not going to get any stronger if you never even make the attempt to lift something, right? You're never going to get more stamina if you never make the attempt to just run.
Yeah.
And this is me just going out there and just running, you know? And it's hard and it's vulnerable and it's scary, but the scarier thing is like staying the exact same person for a year or more. That's terrifying,
Yeah.
right? So I try to push myself out of my comfort zone as much as possible. Even this art style that I've developed is different from my earlier works. I don't even think I was doing the Uzumakis when I met you. You remember? Like,
You had maybe like one or two, but it wasn't like your portfolio wasn't leading forward with that.
no.
I think you showed me literally two examples. You're like, this is what I have. And I was like, that's fucking phenomenal. Let's go.
Thank you. And I appreciate that, because as an artist, like, it's kind of sometimes it's a little intimidating to show off your artwork, because this is purely just your self-expression, just who you are, just bare flat, you know. And I meet a lot of artists who are a little intimidated to take that official step in calling themselves an artist. I'm like, yo, when was the last time you made something? It's like, oh, like 6 months. I'm like, why? It's like, oh, I don't think I'm really a good artist. And it's like, what even is a good artist? Like, you just are an artist and you just express yourself how you see fit, and just appreciate the journey and process of you making something. And if you feel like you can do better on the next one. You feel me? Like, Like my first art piece I ever made, well, the first art piece that I claim, it was so frustrating as a process that I had to like walk away from it multiple times and then come back until my patience was thin. And then I leave and I come back, and I feel like it's so applicable in multiple parts of life, like in growth. Like I try and I try until I literally can't no more, and I revisit it when I have the energy for it. You feel me? Yeah. So I'm just trying to lean more into that every single day and encourage others to do the same.
I think that's a noble pursuit. So one of the things that I ask folks when they get to that point where they're like, "Well, am I really an artist? Am I really creative?" How old are you? If you don't-
23.
23. Today at 23 compared to when you were 15. You don't have to think about specifics.
Yeah.
How many times when you were 15 that you feel scared because you were doing something for the first time compared to today? It has to be way more, right?
Yeah.
When you were 15, there were probably way more moments where you were just shaking and you were like, I don't know that I could do. And it could be anything.
Anything.
Like, it doesn't have to be art related. Right? Every year that passes, we have less and less opportunity and privilege to say, I've tried something for the first time.
Yeah.
So if you look at your creative in that way, your creative process in that way, instead of that was a failure, right? Or that was adjacent to what I'm usually doing, or that really doesn't fit my portfolio with the way that I'm recognized as a creative in my name. So is it marketable? Is somebody going to be able to know what to do with it, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at it in a sense of like today, at this day and age, as many years as I have been an artist, I am doing something for the first time.
Yeah. That's important.
That in itself is a statement.
Yeah.
And that's not to excuse excellence.
Right.
Right. I was raised by a military army man. Like I was raised by a person who raised up every day and was like, by 4 a.m. you wake up in excellence. You are a representation of everything you do and every step that you take.
Yeah.
Right.
Facts.
So never an excuse of excellence, but excellence doesn't mean that you don't stumble.
Right.
It means that you gave yourself the opportunity to stumble and to do it in a way where people can see it and see what progress looks like. Like to fail is a privilege.
It is a privilege because you had the opportunity to try to begin with.
Not everybody has that space.
Not everybody has that space.
Art is a unique industry, moment, livelihood where you can wake up every day and choose to try something and stumble through it and still come out with a tangible thing.
Right.
Whether it's the thing you wanted or not.
Right.
But then it just becomes your point of orientation for the next thing.
Right.
So few people have that opportunity in life.
That's very well said.
No.
And for those who kind of struggle with short-term gratification as well, it's important because it's like once you finish the piece, there is a physical, tangible thing. Like with a lot of things, you don't get that. You just like either come out of it mentally satisfied or not, you know. And I struggled a lot with like short-term gratification and things, but the opportunity to make the expedition of, okay, I'm trying something new, or okay, I'm experimenting with my art, or like how I tackle things in my everyday life. I do have to look at it more of a privilege because so many times I'll beat myself up where like I feel like I didn't do as well as I could have, right? But
Yeah.
Chief Keef said, failure is only the opportunity to try again more intelligently. And it feels like a recon mission every single time that I mess something up because it's like, oh, okay, this is how I don't do that. Or it's like, okay, let me think about the factors that caused me to fail this situation. And, you know, like a lot of our obstacles are self-imposed, and it takes awareness to realize that, like the role that we play in our own suffering. And the more you weed out those things, the more joyous you become.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it look like to ask yourself, what if the universe was conspiring for me instead of against me?
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
Like, what if that failure was just step number one?
Exactly. I like to think of it that is preparing me for the moment that is mine. You know what I mean? Like every single thing that I fumble was preparing me for the moment that I needed. Like there was a lesson to be learned here that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise unless it happened. Even if somebody warned me, like, hey, when you get here, don't do this. One ear out the other. Nothing teaches more than experience.
Nothing.
Literally.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful for every single time that I've fallen on my face, and like I wear it proudly for the most part because it's like I'm Like, you only live one time, and you can't let the past dominate you in the way where, like, you mess something up and it plagues your mind. Like,
Yeah.
a wise man once said, if it's all that you can think about, it's probably not worth the thought.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, you have to have the ability to let go. Like, take what was meant for you to take away and let go of the rest. And then see what happens from there. Because there is going to be an opportunity where the lesson you learned is perfect for that present moment.
Yeah.
Feel me?
Yeah. I mean, we're interpreting everything that's happening again from that very moment that we're present in. And there was I don't know if it was a podcast or if it was a video, so I'm gonna leave it open ended so I'm not lying.
Right.
But there was something that I was watching, and the person was talking about the fact that they were reflecting on pictures of themselves from the past, and that all of a sudden they started taking notes of how they perceived themselves or spoke of themselves in the way that they were physically present in a photograph for years that would come. And then they realized after, I think it was like 10 years of doing this, that it was almost like a pattern of every 5 years when they looked upon themselves after a 5 year mark, they were like, I don't recognize that person and I judge that person so unfairly.
Oh.
So they were reflecting on themselves historically, and we're seeing that there was a pattern of, I have renewed myself so much. I have in my mind, in my body, in my emotional intelligence, whatever that looks like, I have transformed so many times that to now look back, I was unfair to this person. And I don't even recognize this person.
Oh my gosh.
And that is just a still photograph.
Yeah.
And so, what would that look like if you gave yourself that space with your artwork? Where every day you looked back and you said, what would it be like if I didn't recognize this piece as my own? And what would that mean to me?
Yeah.
If I wasn't judging it as a creation of my hands, but rather
Yeah.
a reflection of that time and that moment for me.
Yeah. That's fair. I feel like sometimes we can be extremely cruel to ourselves, especially as creatives. You know, like me through my artwork, it made me do a lot of like inner child work. You know what I mean? Because it's like, with what you were saying, with like the constant renewal of myself, like there was a phase of my life where I had renewed myself, and then I immediately just rejected and discarded every single previous version of myself, and I realized that I was constantly doing that. Like it was a cycle. Like I become better, I see this past version of myself as inferior, but this part of yourself has been doing the absolute best it can,
Yeah.
right, with what it has, and it's learning. And I feel so bad that I looked at my past self like that. Well, I don't feel bad, but I have mercy on myself now, you know, because they didn't know any better. And it's like, as a kid, like, I was just doing the best that I could with what I knew. And I try to create or also live my life in a way that it allows others to not have the same pitfalls that I did as a kid. Like I work with the kids at my church. This is a huge segue, but I work with the kids at my church. And a lot of the people in my generation have kind of spread their wings and went elsewhere where they feel like they can learn more. And they tried in a period of time where I wasn't there because I was grieving and angry and I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I thought the whole of the world was against me, which is another cycle I got to work on. But yeah, they came and some of them parted ways, and now there's almost no one to work with these kids who were sitting exactly where we were, right? And I see them and they just, like, no one really cares. Like the adults are doing their own thing, and it's like people, they come and go and they forget why they're doing it to begin with. And I'm like, yo, like someone has to put on for these kids, man. Someone has to show up for them. So I try to be the type of youth leader at my church that like like the kid me would have looked at it, it's like, yo, that dude is mad cool.
That's what I needed right now.
Exactly. And he makes me kind of happy to come to church even though I don't really want to be here.
Can I add something to that though?
Yeah.
Like, and it doesn't have to change the way that you're seeing that, right? Because again, it's from my perspective, my bias.
Yeah.
I had a really similar period in life where I was just like, nobody gives a single damn about anybody else, right? Like everybody's just in this circle. And it was predominantly from loss, right? From family loss that I think you and I share.
Yeah.
And I had an uncle of mine that really kind of put me in my place in the most loving way. And he was just like, you need to remember that your elders are living life for the first time just like you.
Yeah.
And I was angry. I didn't want to hear that.
Right.
And I know that this is also a segue, but is it really, right? Like,
Right.
you're creating for the first time in this moment. But he really put me in my place where he was just like, your parents, your elders, your whomever that you're looking at is living life for the first time. And I'm not telling you to justify, excuse anybody's actions.
Right.
Right? Boundaries are still existent and should be something that you operate from. But what would it look like if the grace that we were willing to gift others and understanding they're operating from what they know was something that you operated in every day?
Yeah.
Because then it doesn't become a they don't care, they're not present. It becomes a I know what I can do and what my capacity is, and I don't know what their capacity is.
Right.
So I'm no longer holding myself to be the exception to their ability. I just am. I am the example. I am the example I want to be. Right. And so now there is, again, this freedom and this liberty because you are not trying to revolutionize a legacy that never existed in the first place. You have the liberty to create a legacy that you didn't see.
Right. Set that standard yourself.
Yeah. You're not fighting against the wave. You're writing one that never existed, that you happened to be able to be open enough to realize was there.
Right.
And it kind of took a weight off of me because I was like, oh, I am no longer fighting for redemption for other people. If they want to join me wherever they are, beautiful. We walk together.
Right.
But right now, I am just picking up what is absolutely possible for me and what other people are recognized as possible for them.
Right. And just accepting that, like, they're just humans doing their best just as we are. And sometimes we got to forgive people for not knowing better because they don't have any choice but to not know any better right now. And either you accept and educate them in that moment or make the attempt to, or you give them the space.
Yeah, exactly. You could walk away.
Yeah.
Again, because you don't have to justify anyone.
No.
Like, ignorance does not mean that you're devoid of the fact that you hurt someone.
Right.
But you don't have to carry their cross for you. Right? You could walk away, and people can take this however they want to take it. I am not someone who lives my life thinking that people need to forgive everybody. It's just where I am right now.
Yeah.
Perhaps I grow out of it. Perhaps I learn more. Life will continue to humble me.
Right.
Right? I understand that what I know every day more and more is that I know nothing. Right? So I'm fine with life humbling me. I'm fine with saying I don't know. I learned better. I could do better. So, but in where I am right now, I don't think everybody needs to be forgiving or forgiven.
Yeah.
I think some people need to hold on to that to be able to survive, right? But I don't think that survival needs to mean that you're carrying the yoke of what somebody else did.
Yeah, for sure. To kind of engage with that concept, I don't think that forgiving is just like accepting what they've done and then letting them back in. Like, you can forgive somebody and still like maintain your boundaries.
Yeah.
Or just like accept, like, okay, this is, you've revealed to me this is the type of person you are. I know how to move accordingly, but I can still engage with you on this level. Or, okay, I can love you from a distance now, but I already know your patterns. I already know how you can be. I know how you tend to be. So it's like, I still have love for you in my heart, but I cannot forget that this happened. Like they say, God forgives and forgets. We are not God. We are not God. And it's like, to forget would be a disservice to our ability to survive as human beings, right? But I think the forgiveness is to take that weight off of your own heart, right? Like, okay, like, I accept. There's a difference between acceptance and like forgive and forget. Like, I accept this is what you did. I accept this is who you are, and I accept that I may never get an apology. And that's the biggest thing, like being able to like forgive people who never will apologize or will ever feel the need to apologize, because that forgiveness is for you.
Yeah. Closure isn't owed.
It's not. And I don't think like closure is a thing that you can gain externally. Like, any attempt to do so is kind of a sham, because that relies on something that's out of your control, right? Which is the other person to understand where you're coming from. And sometimes you can articulate yourself the most perfect way you possibly can, but you cannot make people see something that they do not want to see, or they do not have the capacity to understand.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And hey, they might understand it like a year or two later, just like how we can revisit our past and be
Exactly.
like, damn, I messed up.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, like my girlfriend from 10th grade, that was messed up. It's way too late for me to apologize now, but that was messed up. You feel me? And like I
Yeah.
accept that from myself, and they have probably accepted that as well. But the most important part is to lift that weight off of ourselves and accept people for who they are and ourselves for who we are. You feel me?
Yeah. And if we get like full circle, I see that art is a tool for that.
Yeah.
Art is a tool to be able to do those interpretations, to make the space for those questions without feeling like there is an ultimatum you have to reach. Right? Not every art,
Yeah.
not every piece, but I feel like whatever it is that's being made, if someone engages with art, it is the liberty to have those conversations of
Right.
agreeance and lack of agreeance internally.
Right.
Because most of the time, when you think about how people engage with art, even in openings, right? Think about openings. Most
Yeah.
of the artists are present, right? You can't talk to everybody. The majority of times, even in the most of public of settings, people are engaging with your art and having an internal dialogue.
Right. More than they're engaging with the artist themselves.
Yeah. Sometimes people walk in and they don't even read the didactic, right? I have gone into spaces where I'm just like, oh, wow, great. There's 30 pieces of art here. You want me to read a paragraph for each of them? I'll come back. I'm going to be honest. Like, I'll come back because
Yeah.
right now I just want to take what's in front
I
of
just
me.
want to
wanna be
engage with the
present,
dialogue.
right?
Yeah.
I want to be present. I want to hear what people around me are saying. There's different ways to digest things, right? And so for all of that, for me, in an aspect of curatorial responsibility,
Yeah.
is that sense of how do we make that open space, again, for people to engage, to disagree, to reflect, to feel isolated from, to see no resemblance,
Right.
to be able to have those conversations of engagement, those moments of what do I need to contend with? Why am I okay with the fact that this piece means nothing to me? Why can't I identify with it?
Right,
You know, like
right.
because we think that if it's in front of us, there is a responsibility to us to be able to pinpoint something.
Right.
Art is one of the very few things where you can walk away from it and feel no consequence, even if you didn't make that initial connection.
Right.
That is a responsibility of art itself too. You are a whole human being. You do not need to live a life of perfection where everything needs to fall into a pretty hole
Right.
and make sense.
And everything has perfect meaning and it's a metaphor for your life or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's okay to just not get it. And sometimes in those situations where I don't understand the artwork around me, like it invites me to engage with other people. Like, hey, like, do you see anything in this? And sometimes I'm like, no, I don't. Or this is the most profound piece of artwork they've ever seen, and they can't wait to tell me about it. And I think that's beautiful too. Like, it's such a meeting ground for multiple different perspectives and ideas to, I don't want to say clash, but I want to say engage with each other. You know what I mean? Because it's like I'm taking my experiences, my livelihood, my current mental perspective on things, and aiming it at this, and somebody else with completely different circumstances and experiences is doing the same thing, and we get to have a dance. You know, we get to tango with it and see like, okay, what do you see? What do I see? How do we feel? And then maybe I'll read the paragraph, but that's usually the last thing I do unless like my brain is me like, I wonder what the artist was thinking here. I always want to give myself the liberty of feeling it myself first, you know? And sometimes, more often now, because I'm trying to become a lot more serious with like institutionalized art and getting my art into institutions, where I'm reading the big paragraph that's always at the beginning of the openings, because it's a very beautiful piece of literature. I'll consider it literature because it does such a good job of summarizing the whole themes of the entire exhibition, and then you get to engage with it. So it's like you have like some subtext onto what the artist was thinking, but not too much where it's telling you what to think. You know, that's why I want to write captions a lot less, even though it's a contradiction because I have to become a better writer to apply for things. I don't want people to be told what I'm thinking all the time. I want you guys to come with your own conclusions and see what you feel, because you might see or feel something that I had no idea about, and you're helping me grow by even letting me know what you felt. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful vulnerability to have, right? That I don't think a lot of people have.
No.
Like, how many times do you find yourself in this day and age, the fact that you are discussing something with someone or debating or honestly, and we don't have to go into anything that's charged,
Okay.
but very rarely are people speaking with each other, rather they're speaking at each other.
Yeah. I'm getting better at like feeling the difference though. You know?
Yes. And so if you write text for your work, write it from that point of perspective. How do I invite someone to speak towards this text rather than just hearing what I'm trying to tell them?
That's genius.
Pay me. No, but
That's genius though, because it's like you're just a painter, you're figuring things out, and then you're like, oh, you want this grant? Give me a biography, give me a statement as far as what this even means. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm telling them like, oh, this is what I think. But it's like I'm not speaking from the perspective of opening the dialogue. I just don't know what to say, so I'm already like loading up what to say in my brain,
Right.
which limits the outcome of where the conversation can go so much. Like, you ever go and walk up to someone and you already know what you're about to say, and then your follow-up statement, and then you speak to them, it just completely ruins any normal social rhythm that could have happened
Yep.
because you're not in the present. And I'm not writing in the present when I'm doing that, and you just opened me up to that.
Yep. And grant writing is like an art of itself.
Yeah.
But if you can answer the purpose of what they're seeking your work to align with, while still asking them to question where they stand when they look at your artwork, not question the value or the directive of your art, but you are making an open enough statement where those judges are looking at it and saying, you absolutely hit the mark of what we are directing towards, but you are also giving us so much more space to understand what are we asking for.
Okay.
That sometimes that makes all the difference, because the judgment panel that is selecting for an open call, for an application, a residency, whatever it may be, they have to hit certain markers where you're like, is your art meeting these? But then they also have to think about, how does this art exist outside of us who hold the definition of what this open call is for?
Right.
And so you don't have to limit yourself to the opportunity to make those panelists question what they stand for with this topic if you hit those markers.
Can I send you some drafts to look at?
I got you. Coming
Yo,
from the nonprofit world.
I
trust and
appreciate
believe.
that, because this is definitely a conversation I'm going to have to like replay and sit with, because you're dropping gems right now. And I hope that all my artist peers who I told to tune in are tuning in, because this episode is partially for you guys, because we all in the same boat. We all trying to figure things out, and we're all trying to grow. And I love that, like, the quote unquote draft class that I'm in, like with the peers that I've made so far, because it's all like just straight love. And we're all just like fighting to understand this huge world that we've just stepped into. Like, the art world's kind of like an ocean. And we're kind of coming from the perspective of the aquarium, where we're just like making art for ourselves, but it's just so much bigger than us, like this world that we're in. But the artwork is also so much bigger than us, and we have to look at it that way. Like, we are only capable of what we perceive ourselves to be capable of.
But don't lose yourself in that,
No. Yeah.
because you're important.
Yeah.
There's a reason you sign your work. And it's not just for the sake of like claiming an ownership. Your name needs to live with that.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to see you to see themselves.
Whew. Yo, gems, absolute gems being dropped right now. So I want to ask you a question. Do you feel like life imitates art, or art imitates life?
Art imitates life for me. I think no matter how wild we can get in our artwork,
Yeah.
we've seen that somewhere. And it might not be so direct or so. Again, every day, every minute, every second, I learn that I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so there's times where I see something in art and I'm like, what universe is this person imagining, right? Like,
Right.
you think of like Afrofuturism, right? Or even something that's actually really concrete in what's happening now and the past, like literary work by Octavia Butler, right? Where you're like, oh my God, she has so explicitly written out a pathwork of where we can get to based off of where we have been and achieved and where we have gotten to,
Yeah.
right? And then there's things where you're like, that could never happen, right? There's things that you question, you're like, what is the foundation or basis from this?
Right.
And then a couple years come and you're like, wow, I just wasn't cognizant enough of
Right.
what was already in the underpinnings of things.
Someone cracked the code.
Yeah. And so now I just finally got to the point where I can interpret it for myself, where my perspective and bias is at, right? And so I think at all times, if I look at Afrofuturism and I see things that make me expand the way that I think, and
Yeah.
I'm like, this does not, this is, there's no way that this art is imitating life. But there is still a foundation there of liberty that tells me this person is living with me right now, and they're telling me what is possible and what is attainable. I just haven't tuned into the possibility of it yet. But somehow, some way, this person saw it and attained it, which means that even if it's a small part of their spirit, they're living in that freedom of Afrofuturism. So it is art imitating life and inviting me to see that that is a possibility that I just haven't tapped into yet.
Wow. Okay, so tell me more about Afrofuturism, because I've never engaged with that type of artwork before.
I'm learning on it myself.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing I'm not going to do is ever speak on something that's not my expertise.
Okay.
So all I can tell you is just that right now I'm sitting with it literary, with it visually, and I'm just trying to consume as much as possible and get into it. Because
cool.
I've been such a literal and in the moment person, especially with the fact that my academic background is in policy, right? And like just analysis of trends and data of the past that tells me what was possible.
Okay.
That Afrofuturism for me, I was
It's
just like,
speaking to you.
I just actually I clashed with it.
Really?
I couldn't see it. I'm like, you're imagining too much. You're doing too much. Like, what tells you that we have the ability to get there?
Right.
It has made me content with my limitation because I have to redefine what freedom looks like for me. So right now, all I can tell you is that I'm a student of it.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting with it, and maybe we come back to another episode a couple seasons from now,
Yeah.
and we can have a totally different conversation. But right now, it is making me a student that has needed to humble myself because I'm like, how can you see this opportunity and this option? Why can't I see it?
Right.
So I am in a beautiful moment of uncomfortable growth.
That's lovely.
So that's all I can tell you about Afrofuturism.
That's lovely. Oh my gosh. It makes me want to learn about Afrofuturism.
Let's do
now.
it.
Being
If there's somebody out there that can tell us more,
Please.
we're in student mode.
Listen,
Please.
come to the show. Talk to us.
We're in student mode.
We want to know. And being in student mode is such a beautiful thing because I like this phrase that says, he who thinks the journey is over is already lost. Like, we already think that, like, our way of thinking is so concrete and superb until we come into contact with something that is just so beyond our way of thinking that it sends us back into ourselves. Like, okay, like, listen,
Yeah.
you don't know nothing, brother. You're
Every
going to have
day.
to learn again. You have to relearn again. Like,
Every day.
like everything is so layered, and now you're in a whole new world that you got to understand. Like, learning is something that, like, sometimes I usually, like, fight with it. Sometimes I really give myself grace for not understanding stuff, for not pulling it off perfectly the first time. But that's never been the nature of growth. You know what I mean? That's especially like growth within mindsets, right? Like the fact that Afrofuturism is making you like grapple with your concept of freedom, that means it's good freaking art. Like there's this one artist named Cece McMonaghy who is going to be showing who's going to be showing at NSU Art Museum.
CC McMonagle? I'm going to write that down.
She's awesome. She's really great. She's going to be showing at NSU Art Museum on November 16th, 17th, right? And her artwork, like I did a studio visit with her like last year when I was just trying to attach such a strong philosophy to every single thing that I did. And like to see her just like work on multiple pieces at a time and just like, you know what? I'll come back to this when I feel like it. And using literally any type of medium that she wanted to use, it blew me away. Because I didn't know I was allowed to be this free. And that's the thing, we just never know that we're allowed to be this free.
Oh, that's a gift.
That's a gift. Man,
So keep doing that.
I will. Thank you. And I appreciate the role that you've played in my journey a lot. Because like when I met you, it was in a space of vulnerability where like I was encouraged to do so, and like I didn't know how that was going to work out for me. And it just warmed my heart that I was able to just open up about like what I was struggling with, and then be in a room full of people who just completely understood and accepted and mirrored and walked with me in that moment. So I really do appreciate you a lot.
Thank you for the trust. For real.
Yeah.
And if there's one last statement I can make, thank you for wholly, fully, completely showing up as who you are, black man.
Thank you.
We need that in the US of A.
Yes, we do.
Show the fuck up. Thank you for giving us your vulnerability and your wholesomeness.
Thank you.
It's needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Man, I'm gonna hug you after this episode's over, man. Very long hug. But yeah, everybody, if we can end this off and say one thing, it's just be yourself. Be willing to learn. Be willing to be a student. Be willing to accept that you know nothing and that you're trying to understand and that you're doing your best. And everybody else is on this planet for the first time just like you. And sometimes they don't get it either. But you got to give yourself grace. Got to give everybody grace, but also maintain your boundaries because that's what's really important. Thank you so much to Z, Lopez, Del, Carmen.
Got it again.
Thank you to Miami Community Radio. Thank you for Vault Creative Studios coming at you live 2025. Thank you to Philip, co-owner of Miami Community Radio. And thank you for everybody who is going to be showing after me. This was so great to have you guys, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Philip, play the track. Produced by Shan Marino, CEO of Vault Creative Studios. There we go.
Can we drop a freestyle? No.
You can have bars, but don't put your wings.